In this video, we're going to take a look at some simple things about CSS syntax. Now, the CSS syntax requires that you create what's called a CSS rule. And this CSS rule has a selector, an item which is selected in our HTML, such as an h1 tag. And then we have what's called a declaration, which is a property and value pair. A property could be something such as font family, and then a value could be something such as sans serif or Helvetica or whatever font that we're choosing to use for that h1 tag. Now we can have multiple property and values within one CSS rule, which makes it kind of nice. Now I'm going to skip down a little bit, and we have some stuff about CSS shorthand. I'm not going to really worry about that right now. I'm going to go straight down to CSS selectors. Now there are three types of CSS selectors. There's a type selector, which selects a regular HTML element, such as a body tag or h1 or paragraph. Then we have classes that we name, and these are classes that we name in our code itself. And we also have what are called IDs, and you'll see that these are done a special way with a pound sign. Notice classes have a dot ahead of them. Notice that IDs have a pound sign ahead of them, and that type selectors or element selectors don't have anything before them. So that's very important for understanding how those are done. So I'm going to go over to Dreamweaver just very quickly to show you. Here's some HTML code, and this will show you how basic HTML is applied. I'm going to go to the design view, and you'll see that I have a bunch of different tags here. These tags are the different elements that I have. If I click on the body tag, I can go over to my CSS styles panel, and I can create a new CSS rule. Now, the different types that we're going to apply are going to be a class or an ID or a tag. If I do a tag, you'll notice that it corresponds to the tag I currently have selected, which is body. That's great. Now, the way that we're going to do this rule is, are we going to do it in this rule or in this document only, or are we going to do it in a new style sheet? For right now, let's just do it in this document only, just so we can get an easy style here. For this, I'm going to choose a different font family, Verdana, and I'm going to change the color to green, just so we definitely see it. Now if I click apply, you'll notice that all the text in the entire document has changed. Now if I look at the code, you'll notice here's the rule that I made. There's the body tag, there's the selector. Here are the declarations I made. I have one property, which is font family, and here's the values for font family, and then I have another property which is color, and there's the value for color. So that's pretty easy to make changes there. Let's try something else. I'm going to make a setting for the page heading, and you'll see that I selected that, and if I look at the code, here's where it says div id equals header. I'm going to go back to the code view, make sure that I'm inside there, and click on that tag. Now I'm going to go over to new CSS rule, and you'll see this time it automatically created a compound based upon my selection, and this is going to be a selector where I can adjust things. I just want it to select just header. Click OK. And now I'm going to change the background color to something kind of orangey. This is not choosing very good colors, of course. I'm just doing this for effect, just to show you what's happening. Click OK, and you'll see that that heading, our header section, is now yellow. But if I go back to my code, it's created a new selector with a property, background color, and a value, and it has not changed my code at all. My code inside the markup. So that's kind of the basics of how CSS works, and we'll be looking at this, of course, more in depth. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out is that, of course, we have different ways to link to our CSS. Right now we're doing the first way, which is embedding the CSS in a page itself. But what we're going to do in the future is actually link to our CSS file so that our CSS is external, and we'll be doing that later in the tutorials. Now we'll also be playing around with different types of selectors. Some of the selectors that we'll deal with are grouping selectors, descendant or contextual selectors, and then we also might do pseudo classes for our links and hovers. But we'll talk about that more in the future as we do the tutorials. So if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll see you in the next section.